You're nothing, Daniel. A worthless man I should never have married. Those were Clarissa's cutting words as she clung to his boss's arm at the gala, laughing loud enough for the world to hear. You'll never be half the man Patrick is, she added, her finger stabbing the air at her husband like he was dirt beneath her shoe. And later, with a venomous whisper meant only for him, she said, I'm leaving you for Patrick. At least he makes me feel like a queen. Her cruelty didn't stop there. At home, she mocked him again, look at you, scrubbing glasses like a servant while real men like Patrick build empires. And finally, she delivered the dagger that sealed her fate, soon I'll leave you, Daniel. Patrick gives me everything you can't. What Clarissa never realized was that the man she called worthless was not just her husband, but the billionaire owner her so-called boss secretly worked for. His silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. And his revenge would leave her with nothing but regret. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like a physical blow to your chest? If you were in Daniel's place, what would you have done? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did you really wear that to dinner? God, you embarrass me. Those were the first words that sliced into Daniel Whitmore the moment he sat down beside his wife, Clarissa, at the long mahogany table glittering with crystal glasses and polished silver. Her voice wasn't a whisper. She wanted the whole table to hear. On the other side of her sat Patrick Reynolds, Daniel's so-called boss. Patrick chuckled, swirling his wine, letting Clarissa's insult hang like smoke. He leaned closer, his cologne thick in the air, and whispered loud enough for Daniel to hear. Clarissa deserves someone who can keep up with her taste. Not this. The table erupted in laughter. Daniel felt his chest tighten, but he said nothing. His calloused hands gripped the stem of his glass, knuckles whitening as though the crystal might shatter. Clarissa didn't stop there. She tapped Patrick's arm with playful intimacy, ignoring her husband entirely. At least some men know how to dress like they own the room. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass, her diamond earrings trembling in the chandelier's light as she laughed harder than anyone else. Daniel lowered his gaze to the white tablecloth, stained with the shadow of his shame. Every bite of food, every laugh around him, felt like knives pressed against his ribs. He had built this entire company from the ground up, yet here he was, watching his wife swoon over a man who owed everything to him. But no one else knew. To them, Daniel was just a mid-level worker, tolerated out of pity. Clarissa had made sure of that. Patrick raised his glass, smirking. To strong women, who know their worth. Clarissa's hand slid over his, bold, unapologetic, right there in front of everyone. She tilted her head back and laughed as though Daniel no longer existed. The humiliation burned through him, but his silence was deliberate. He didn't flinch, didn't protest. Not a word. He let her believe she had killed whatever manhood he had left. But behind his eyes, something colder stirred, a storm no one at that table could see. The waiter filled Daniel's glass again, but he didn't touch it. He sat motionless, a ghost in his own marriage, while the two people closest to him mocked his worth. Inside, though, he was already planning. Clarissa leaned close to Patrick, whispering just loud enough for Daniel's ears alone, "One day soon, I'll trade this dead weight for a real man." Daniel's fork scraped across the plate like steel against bone. His jaw locked, but his face stayed calm. His silence was not weakness. It was the calm before the kind of storm that tears down everything in its path. And Clarissa had no idea the storm belonged to him. The mansion was quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge and Clarissa's heels clicking against the marble floor. She had changed out of her glittering gown, now wrapped in a silky robe that shimmered in the dim kitchen light. Daniel stood at the counter in his rolled-up sleeves, washing the last of the wine glasses. His shoulders sagged as though the laughter from dinner still clung to him. "Pathetic," she muttered, walking past him without looking. Daniel glanced up, his jaw tight. "What did you say?" She spun, eyes sharp. "I said you're pathetic." Do you think anyone at that table saw you as a man? You sat there silent while Patrick filled the room with power, while I had to pretend you belonged at my side. He set the glass down, his hands trembling from restraint more than fear. You humiliated me in front of everyone tonight. Humiliated you? She laughed, a cruel sound that bounced off the high ceilings. You humiliate yourself every day you breathe in this house. Look at you, scrubbing glasses like a servant while men like Patrick build empires. I should have been his wife. Daniel's stomach twisted. He looked around the kitchen. Marble counters, imported cabinets, a chandelier worth more than most people's houses. He had built it all. Every brick, every dollar, every chandelier bulb hung because of him. Yet she sneered at him as though he were a beggar. She moved closer, lowering her voice but not her venom. You're nothing but a paycheck that never arrived. And don't think I don't see it in your eyes, that desperate little dream that one day you'll be more than this. You won't. Men like you don't rise. They crawl until they die. Daniel held her stare, unmoving. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes that made her shift uncomfortably. But then he blinked, looked down, and dried his hands. That was all. Submission. She smirked, thinking she had broken him again. I'll be in Patrick's office tomorrow. Don't wait up. Her robe brushed against him as she walked away, leaving behind the sting of her perfume and the echo of her contempt. Upstairs, the bedroom door slammed. Daniel stood alone in the kitchen, staring at his reflection in the dark glass of the window. His own face looked hollow, but his reflection smirked back at him. Slowly, he walked to his study. He opened a drawer. Inside was a folder stamped with heavy gold lettering, Whitmore Enterprises. Deeds. Stock certificates. Confidential contracts. Proof that the empire Clarissa worshipped, Patrick's world of power, was his. He brushed his hand across the papers, his expression unreadable. Then he closed the drawer quietly, locking it. Clarissa thought she'd buried him tonight. She had no idea he was simply laying the foundation for her grave. Sunday sunlight spilled across the Whitmore estate as Clarissa's family filled the garden patio. Crystal pitchers of lemonade glistened, children chased each other on the grass, and laughter floated in the air. It should have been the perfect family gathering. Instead, Daniel stood like a shadow at the edge of it all, hands tucked into his pockets, a silent man in his own home. Clarissa, you've outdone yourself again, her sister, Lydia, gushed as she reached for another pastry. The place looks like something out of a magazine. You really married well. Clarissa gave a laugh that sliced straight into Daniel's chest. Married well, she echoed, glancing deliberately at him. Please. I'm carrying this marriage on my back. If I had waited a little longer, I could have been Mrs. Reynolds instead. The table erupted with awkward chuckles, some forced, others genuine. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His mother-in-law leaned closer, whispering, "She's joking, right?" Clarissa smirked. "Of course," she said, though her eyes never left Daniel's face. Moments later, as Daniel poured himself a drink, Clarissa leaned across the table to Lydia, her voice low but not low enough. "I can't live like this much longer. Patrick treats me like a queen. Daniel? He's dead weight. I'll leave him soon. Just watch." Daniel froze mid-pour. The lemonade overflowed, dripping onto the tablecloth. He could hear every word. His heart thudded against his ribs, but still, he didn't move, didn't speak. Clarissa noticed the spill and rolled her eyes. "See what I mean?" she announced loudly. "He can't even pour a glass without making a mess. Imagine trusting him to run a household, let alone provide for one." The patio filled with uncomfortable laughter again. Daniel wiped the spill quietly, his face unreadable. Inside, though, the betrayal burrowed deeper, carving a wound that words alone couldn't measure. Later, when the crowd dispersed into little clusters of chatter, Daniel stepped onto the porch to catch his breath. That's when he heard it, Clarissa again, this time in the garden, whispering to Lydia while sipping her drink. Patrick said he'll help me transition once I leave Daniel. I'll finally be where I belong. Lydia's eyes widened. You're serious? Clarissa's lips curled into a satisfied grin. Dead serious. Why should I waste my beauty on a man with no future? Patrick is power. Daniel is nothing. From the porch, Daniel's hands curled into fists so tight his nails dug into his palms. Every muscle screamed to confront her, to unleash the truth. But he didn't. He stepped back into the house, his silence as sharp as steel. Clarissa thought she was weaving her escape. What she didn't know was that every word she spoke was tightening the noose around her own neck. The credit card statement lay on the counter when Daniel came home late that evening. He picked it up, his brow furrowing at the figures: jewelry boutiques, designer suits, a luxury watch store. Thousands upon thousands, drained in a single week. Before he could process it, Clarissa appeared in the doorway, slipping on a pair of diamond-studded heels. Her lips curved into a careless smile. Oh, that? Don't bother reading it. I needed to buy Patrick something nice. He deserves to be spoiled. Daniel's chest tightened. You spent my money on him. She laughed, pulling a silk shawl over her shoulders. Your money. Don't make me laugh, Daniel. You barely make enough to cover the utilities. That card was meant for me. And if I choose to use it on a man who knows my worth, that's my business. His hands shook as he lowered the statement back onto the counter. I worked for that. She stepped closer, her perfume sharp, her voice a dagger. Worked for what? Pennies? Dreams that never became anything. You should be grateful I'm still here. Do you know how many women would have already left a failure like you? Daniel's jaw flexed. I am your husband. Not to me, she spat, her eyes flashing. You're a roommate with the wrong last name. Patrick is the man I deserve. He has power, presence, ambition. You're just a burden I can't wait to unload. She moved to the dining room, where Patrick sat in Daniel's chair, the head of the table, the seat he once held with pride. Patrick raised a glass of wine, smirking at the sight of Daniel standing there empty-handed. Clarissa leaned over, filled Patrick's plate herself, and laughed like a hostess entertaining royalty. When Daniel reached for the serving dish, she snatched it away. Don't, she said coldly. You've eaten enough. Patrick chuckled, chewing slowly, savoring both the food and the humiliation. Clarissa, you really don't have to fuss over me. Oh, but I want to, she purred, running a hand along his arm. Daniel stood frozen at the edge of the table. Every nerve in his body screamed to break, to shout, to drag Patrick out of the house with his bare hands. But instead, he turned. Wordless. His footsteps echoed up the staircase, heavy as coffin nails. In the quiet of his study, he unlocked the drawer again. The papers waited, deeds, contracts, documents that would flip her smugness into ashes. He traced the edges of the folder with steady fingers, breathing slow, like a soldier readying for war. Downstairs, laughter floated up, sharp and cruel. Clarissa believed she had crushed him tonight. But in truth, she had just handed him the perfect weapon. The morning sun cast long shadows across the estate as Clarissa strutted into the foyer, her phone pressed to her ear. Daniel trailed behind, carrying her shopping bags like a servant. At the door stood Mr. Harlan, the family's longtime lawyer. He adjusted his tie nervously, holding a thick envelope. Morning, Daniel. Clarissa, he said with a nod. Clarissa's eyes narrowed. What are you doing here unannounced? If this is another one of Daniel's pathetic attempts at business, I don't have the time. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat. Actually, this concerns both of you. It's important. He glanced at Daniel, then back at Clarissa. Do you realize who you're? She cut him off with a wave of her hand. Save it, Harlan. I've heard enough of your boring legal talk. Daniel doesn't own anything worth discussing. He's a nobody. The lawyer hesitated, his lips pressing into a line. Daniel met his gaze briefly, a silent message passing between them. Harlan gave the faintest nod, then tucked the envelope back into his briefcase. As he left, he muttered just loud enough for Clarissa to hear, "Don't underestimate the man standing beside you. One day, you'll regret it." Clarissa rolled her eyes so hard it was almost theatrical. "What a joke," she scoffed, tossing her hair. "Even your friends pity you, Daniel. How embarrassing." Later that afternoon, Clarissa retreated to the bedroom, cackling into her phone. Daniel's footsteps passed by the door, and she spoke louder, making sure he could hear. "Yes, Patrick, I'll be free soon. Don't worry, Daniel's too blind to see what's happening. He couldn't stop me if he tried." Her laughter bled into the hallway like poison. Downstairs, the maid, Angela, quietly scrubbed the kitchen counters. She had watched everything for months, the cruelty, the insults, the shameless flirting with Patrick. But that afternoon, as Clarissa strutted past her, Angela slipped her phone from her apron and pressed record. The words echoed in crystal clarity, "Daniel is worthless. I'll leave him soon. Patrick will give me the life I deserve." Angela saved the file, her hands trembling. She wasn't sure when, but she knew Daniel would need this. That night, Clarissa flaunted herself in front of the mirror, holding up a gown she planned to wear to Patrick's gala. Daniel stood in the doorway, silent. She caught his reflection and smirked. "Don't look at me like that. Tomorrow, when I'm on Patrick's arm, people will finally see me as I should be seen. And you? You'll still be the invisible man, fading into the wallpaper." Daniel's jaw flexed, but his voice remained calm. "Be careful, Clarissa. Not everything is as it seems." She laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "The only thing that seems clear is that you'll never be more than a failure." But as she turned away, she missed the flicker in his eyes, the kind of flicker that only comes before fire consumes everything. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and laughter as Clarissa clung to Patrick's arm like a trophy wife in waiting. The gala was supposed to be for charity, but for her it was another stage, another chance to prove she belonged among the powerful. Daniel trailed a step behind, unnoticed, like a shadow. He wore a simple suit, the kind Clarissa had mocked countless times, but his eyes held a strange stillness that no one could read. Patrick leaned down, whispering loud enough for Clarissa's circle of friends to hear. "When are you going to make it official? Daniel looks more out of place every night." Clarissa laughed, her earrings flashing under the light. "Soon. Very soon. I'm done wasting my youth on a man with no future." She glanced back at Daniel, her voice dripping with venom. "He doesn't even realize I'm already gone." Her friends smirked behind their champagne glasses, eyes darting between Daniel and Patrick. To them, Daniel was just a silent backdrop to her ambition. Later that night, in a quieter corner of the ballroom, Clarissa clutched Patrick's hand. "Once I leave Daniel, we'll be unstoppable," she whispered. "I'll finally be where I belong. Imagine the empire we could build." Patrick grinned, but his eyes flickered uneasily toward Daniel, who stood at the bar, expression unreadable. "Careful, Clarissa. He's not as weak as you think." She scoffed, tightening her grip on Patrick. "He's invisible. I could spit in his face, and he'd just clean it up. Trust me, Patrick, Daniel Whitmore is finished." At that exact moment, Daniel lifted his glass and met her gaze across the room. His stare was steady, unblinking, as though he could see straight through her. For the first time, Clarissa shifted in discomfort. But when he looked away, calm as stone, she laughed again, convincing herself it meant nothing. When they returned home, Clarissa kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the velvet sofa. "Did you see the way they looked at me tonight? I was radiant. Patrick couldn't take his eyes off me." Daniel stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, his face unreadable. "Is that what you want?" he asked quietly. "What I want," she snapped, "is a life worth living. Power. Status. A husband who doesn't drag me down. Patrick is everything you're not, Daniel. And when the time comes, I won't hesitate to leave you behind." Daniel nodded slowly. "Good," he murmured. Her eyes narrowed. "Good. Yes." His tone was calm, almost serene. "Because when that time comes, you'll finally see me clearly." For a moment, the air thickened with something she couldn't name. His voice wasn't desperate, nor broken. It was final, resolute, like the sound of a door closing forever. Clarissa waved it off with a scoff, pouring herself another drink. Empty words from an empty man. But upstairs, as she drifted to sleep with visions of Patrick's empire, Daniel quietly packed away documents, sealed envelopes, and keys. By dawn, half his wardrobe was gone. And so was he. The ballroom buzzed with power. Tonight wasn't just another gala, it was Patrick Reynolds' crowning moment, or so he thought. He stood tall at the podium, Clarissa glowing beside him, soaking in the applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patrick boomed, "tonight we celebrate not only success but the future. Together, we will expand Whitmore Enterprises into horizons never dreamed of." Clarissa's eyes sparkled. She held her head high, smiling as though she already wore a crown. In her mind, she was already Mrs. Reynolds. Daniel, standing in the shadows near the back, was nothing more than a ghost. But then, the master of ceremonies stepped forward. "Before we continue, our true guest of honor has arrived. A man whose vision built the very empire we celebrate tonight. Please welcome, the owner of Whitmore Enterprises, Mr. Daniel Whitmore." The room went silent. Every head turned. Daniel stepped forward, slow and steady, his presence commanding in a way no one had ever seen before. His simple suit suddenly looked regal under the chandeliers. His eyes, calm and unflinching, cut through the crowd like blades. Clarissa froze, her smile cracking. Patrick's jaw dropped, color draining from his face. Daniel reached the podium, shook the MC's hand, and turned to the sea of stunned faces. His voice was firm, measured. "Thank you. For too long, I let others wear the mask of my labor. But tonight, I reclaim what is mine. Whitmore Enterprises is, and has always been, my creation." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras flashed. Murmurs exploded like firecrackers. Clarissa's legs trembled. "No," she whispered under her breath, her nails digging into Patrick's arm. This isn't possible." Daniel's gaze swept the room until it landed on her. "Some of you," he continued, his voice steady as steel, "have mistaken silence for weakness. Kindness for emptiness. But tonight, masks fall. Truth doesn't whisper, it roars." He turned slightly, his eyes boring into Patrick. "Mr. Reynolds, you've enjoyed pretending to be master of this empire. Unfortunately, your services are no longer required. You're fired. Effective immediately." The crowd erupted. Patrick's face flushed scarlet. "You can't do this." Daniel cut him off with a raised hand. "I can. And I just did." Security stepped forward as Patrick sputtered, humiliated. Clarissa's world shattered in real time. Her real man, her ticket to status, was nothing more than an employee Daniel had just discarded. Her knees nearly buckled. "Daniel," she stammered, her voice strangled. You never told me." Daniel's stare was ice. "You never asked. You only mocked." Betrayal has a way of blinding fools to the truth standing right in front of them. The audience roared with applause, some in shock, others in awe. Clarissa stood trembling, her mouth dry, her future collapsing. Daniel stepped down from the podium, every step measured, every eye in the room fixed on him. For the first time, Clarissa realized the man she thought worthless had just become the most powerful man in the room. And his revenge had only begun. The applause still echoed when Daniel lifted his hand, signaling silence. The ballroom hushed instantly, every eye locked on him. He didn't need to raise his voice, his calm presence alone demanded attention. "There is something else," he said, his gaze sweeping the crowd before pinning Clarissa like a hawk fixing on prey. "For years, I let someone sit beside me and spit on my name. I let her mock, betray, and humiliate me. Tonight, the mask comes off." A flick of his hand, and the massive screens lining the ballroom walls flickered to life. Gasps rippled as Angela, the maid, stepped forward from the shadows with a remote in her hand. She pressed play. Clarissa's voice filled the room, sharp, cruel, undeniable. "Daniel is worthless. I'll leave him soon. Patrick will give me the life I deserve." The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, shocked laughter. Clarissa's face drained of color. "Turn it off," she screamed, lunging toward the screen. This is fake." Daniel didn't flinch. "It's your voice, Clarissa. Your words. Your truth." She spun toward him, her voice cracking. "Daniel, I was upset, I didn't mean." But he wasn't finished. He gestured, and another recording played. This time her laughter rang out, "He's not a man, he's a burden. I'll spit in his face and he'll still clean it up." The audience gasped louder. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others sneered openly at her. Clarissa clutched her chest, tears streaking her mascara. "Please, stop." Daniel's voice was ice. "Stop. You didn't stop when you spat on me at our own table. You didn't stop when you told our families I was nothing. You didn't stop when you sold your dignity for gifts bought with my money." He stepped forward, pulling a thick folder from his suit pocket. "Tonight, I strip you of what you worship most. Luxury. Status. Wealth. All of it." He opened the folder and read aloud, his voice steady, effective immediately. "All joint accounts are frozen. This house, these cars, these jewels, they belong to me, and now to our children. You, Clarissa Whitmore, are left with nothing." The crowd broke into murmurs, some clapping in approval, others gasping at the brutality of it. Clarissa collapsed onto her knees, her robe slipping slightly as she grabbed his leg. "Daniel, please. Don't do this. I was blind, I didn't see you. I'll change." Daniel's eyes didn't soften. He bent slightly, his words sharp enough to cut her open. "You saw enough to betray me. That is all you'll ever be remembered for." He pulled his leg free, turned, and faced the crowd. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "Never mistake silence for weakness." The room erupted in thunderous applause. Cameras flashed. Clarissa's sobs echoed through the ballroom as Daniel walked away, her world crumbling behind him. For the first time, she was truly powerless. 2 weeks later, the Whitmore mansion glowed brighter than ever. Tonight was not another business gala but a private celebration, the kind reserved for kings. Guests in shimmering gowns and sharp tuxedos filled the grand hall, raising their glasses in honor of Daniel Whitmore, the man the world now recognized as the true titan behind the empire. At his side stood a woman no one expected. Emily Carter, graceful, kind-eyed, the daughter of a retired schoolteacher. She wasn't dripping in jewels or designer labels. Instead, she wore a simple emerald gown that seemed to shine brighter than all the diamonds in the room. She smiled at Daniel as though she saw not his wealth, but his soul. The contrast was blinding. And Clarissa saw it the moment she stormed through the doors, her hair tangled, her once perfect dress wrinkled. Gasps swept the room. Guests pulled back as though her disgrace were contagious. "Daniel," she screamed, her voice hoarse. "Daniel, please. Don't do this to me." Security rushed forward, but Daniel lifted a hand. The music faded, all eyes locking on the broken woman stumbling into the celebration. Clarissa dropped to her knees, clutching at the hem of Daniel's suit. "I was wrong. I was blind. You're the man I should have loved, the man I should have stood by. Give me another chance, please." The crowd held its breath. Emily stepped back respectfully, her hand resting gently on Daniel's arm. Daniel looked down at Clarissa, his face calm, unreadable. "Another chance," he repeated softly. "How many chances did I give you while you spat in my face? While you called me worthless? While you betrayed me with a man who couldn't even stand on his own?" Clarissa's tears streaked her cheeks as she shook her head. "I'll do anything, Daniel. I'll make it right, I swear. I'll be the wife you deserve." For a moment, silence stretched. Then Daniel bent low, close enough for only her to hear. "You had your chance, Clarissa. You buried it with every word you used to destroy me. There is no resurrection for what you killed." Her sobs cracked into the marble floor, raw and pitiful. Daniel straightened, turned to security, and gave a single nod. The guards took her arms, lifting her as she screamed. "Daniel! Please! Don't leave me with nothing. Don't you remember the love we once had?" But Daniel didn't turn back. He took Emily's hand instead, raising it high for the room to see. The crowd erupted in applause, the music swelling again. Cameras flashed, capturing the image of a man reborn and a woman erased. As Clarissa was dragged through the doors, her cries faded into the night. For her, the mansion that had once been her throne was now nothing more than a palace of ghosts. And for Daniel, it was the beginning of a new kingdom, built not on betrayal, but on strength, truth, and dignity. The city moved on quickly. Headlines shifted, parties continued, business deals were struck, but for Clarissa Whitmore, life had frozen in ruin. Her once glittering circle of friends ignored her calls. The women she bragged to now sneered when they saw her walking past in second-hand clothes. Patrick Reynolds, the man she'd staked her future on, disappeared without a word the moment Daniel cast him out. Rumors swirled that he had fled overseas, broke and disgraced. Clarissa, who once strutted through boutiques dripping in diamonds, now counted coins at a rundown grocery store. She rented a single, moldy apartment where the ceiling leaked when it rained. The silence there mocked her, no laughter, no admirers, no empire. Just the ghosts of what she had lost. Every night she turned on the small, flickering television, hoping for distraction. But instead, she was haunted. There he was, Daniel Whitmore. Smiling in interviews, shaking hands with world leaders, expanding his empire further than ever. And always at his side was Emily, radiant in her quiet grace. One evening, a headline cut her deeper than any insult. Whitmore donates $50 million to build schools, credits inspiration to his new wife. Clarissa threw the remote at the screen, shattering it. Her reflection glared back at her in the cracked glass, hollow eyes, smeared makeup, a ghost of the woman she once was. Meanwhile, Daniel's life was the picture of triumph. The mansion thrived again, not with shallow parties but with warmth. His children laughed freely, no longer hearing their father called worthless. Emily tucked them into bed, her presence like sunlight filling every room. Daniel's silence had once been mistaken for weakness, now it was the strength of a man who needed no validation, no applause, only truth. At a charity gala months later, Daniel addressed the crowd once more. Cameras flashed, the world listening. "Power is not about wealth," he said. "It's about how you treat those closest to you. Betrayal nearly destroyed me, but it also taught me who I truly was. And tonight, I stand not as a man humiliated, but as a man free." The applause was thunderous. Far away, Clarissa sat outside the same hall, shivering in the cold, her eyes fixed on the lights glowing from within. She could hear the music, the laughter, the cheers for the man she once spat on. She whispered into the night, voice cracking, "That should have been me." But no one heard. No one cared. For Daniel Whitmore, life had come full circle, from betrayal, through humiliation, to a victory so complete it left nothing for his enemies but dust. And for Clarissa? Her kingdom of cruelty had crumbled into ashes. Justice had spoken.